Alright, so what happens when games forget the player and exist only to monetize? Well, we're at that point now where games that used to be driven by passion from studios who actually gave a shit are now built with one goal purely, and that's monetization. And there's nothing wrong with that, but in the process, they lost the soul, the heart that game development used to have. That feeling of delivering a complete title, an experience that stood on its own. Nowadays, you're lucky if your game's even finished at launch. Most games now adopt the process of shoving you into multiplayer and locking content behind DLC, or either bake microtransactions into the core loop of the entire gameplay. And it didn't used to be like that so long ago, but the model shifted from satisfying the player to now squeezing the player of whatever they can. Most games today aren't meant to be played, they're meant to be sold. What led me here? Honestly, I was just playing a lot of older shit. I realized I booted up Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. That's a great game to me. Although it was a break from the main series, but it had the God of War style of hack and slash combat. I enjoyed that. I played it in and out about 2 times. I played Tony Hawk's Underground, and mainly because no skateboarding games even exist anymore, and if they do, they're really shitty attempts. And I even replayed Shadow of Mordor for the 8th time. It's really addicting and fun as fuck. But then I really wondered, why do I play these titles still? Why do I love these games so much? Why don't I want to play anything new? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with me? Why don't I feel this way about new games? Why don't I want to replay a new game that just came out 8 times over and over? And the thing about me is I always usually give new games a chance, because I can either pirate them or just outright buy it most of the time. But half the time, the games that just come out are just bummy. They have no spark, no grit. They all look like a copy of each other. It's just half the time, people are making a game just to make a game for the sake of it, or directly copying other games' core loops rather than bridging it off as their own. Most new games, I'd say, aren't reimagining anything. They're just redoing the same formula over and over and over till another one can magically make the breakthrough, or in the realm of purchasing games on Steam, either flip Unity assets like it's a dropshipping business. Most games aren't building worlds anymore or building anything. Rather fact, they're just building systems that can find a way to keep people hooked and spending whatever dollars they have on their in-game store. Now, I will say, not all games are like this, but what led us here? How did we get to the point where it wasn't just one publisher, one developer, one studio, one game to doing this? And we have to take a trip to the past and really revisit what started this. It was the rise of internet and online play. Everything sort of shifted. Studios could now update their games after launch. Most importantly, they also figured out that they could now add DLC and repackage their games with more content post-launch. Initially, nothing was wrong with this, but cosmetics, extra playtime, upgrades were now shifting the narrative of games from being a center of art and entertainment as a way to funnel engagement, and the focus was rather driven from player experience to now retention. The developers began building for games on hours played, daily login rewards, battle passes, loot boxes, in-game currencies. Realistically, there was never anything wrong with this approach, I'd say. It gave video games their cutting edge to live past 1 week, 1 month after their launch, with the ability to add content and keep them going for years until the next. Somewhere along the way, that got lost heavily and diluted. You can think of titles that do this, like Grand Theft Auto 5, or maybe the Dying Light series. But let me further bridge this with other real-world examples of how studios rather aren't focusing on the games anymore, but rather focus on how to squeeze every dollar out of the player they can. Let's look at a really big series like Call of Duty. Now, Call of Duty is full of multiple studios, and we'll get into them individually. But when we had titles like World at War, Modern Warfare, Black Ops 1 through 3, where the story at first was made to pull you in and made you play it all the way out, it was a must for every Call of Duty game. It was creating memorable characters that lived way past the game.
This video is triggered to play upon my assassination. Cordestier, you know how to proceed. My death will shine light upon ubiquitous darkness.
But then online play rolled around, and it not only shifted the entire track for the Call of Duty series, but it created a split where some people were there for the story and others just wanted to run multiplayer. It's fine, but what led after that split was horrifying. Publishers now finally saw an opportunity to exploit the players of the game, and rather than letting you enjoy the game, they introduced map packs and Black Ops 1 and 2 and 3 and so on and so forth that eventually stopped. And these map packs ended up eventually splitting the casuals of the game and also delivering some of the worst, horrible fucking maps designed ever behind a paywall. And then they also locked certain broken guns behind these DLC packs. This pattern eventually stopped, but it led to a new one where now campaigns also didn't even matter anymore. Let's squeeze every single dollar we can now and incentivize battle passes and sell you what was already a $60 to a $70 game with $20 microtransactions riddled everywhere. And it wasn't just one studio doing this to throw the blame at, but Infinity Ward, Treyarch, Sledgehammer, Raven all followed this core system to pump out that same gameplay loop every year. And it wasn't about letting the game live past launch, but rather what felt like shaking you as a player dry. Ubisoft is also a textbook case of, we could have kept making good shit, but nah, fuck it, let's ruin it for money. Now they're trying to recover and build their platform back up by returning to their roots and actually making real titles, simply because they bulldozed their entire whole fucking platform for XP booster sales, R6 credits, Helix credits, and losing the core values of what their games were. But Ubisoft had some of the most interesting games that had actual potential to be something greater. Now, I say that kind of vaguely, but when we think of Assassin's Creed, the entire gameplay loop was climb a tower, sink points, drop down, get some chests that have secret loot in it, or maybe whatever currencies in the game, assassinate a guy, progress, eventually finish the game, or take it as a title like Far Cry, where it was get told instructions, go to X, Y, or Z, and it may take you 3 to 5 minutes to get there, clear an outpost, and eventually run into rebels, or some fucking enemy system in that game, or either Ghost Recon, which is similarly like Far Cry, but it's more of get to so-and-so boss, assassinate sub-boss or subdue them, go 5,000 meters across the fucking map, or if you're lucky, you fast traveled there already, get into a loud gunfight, do it all over again. So it became at a certain point where they weren't just trying to make new games and be interesting and innovate on certain systems. They were rather making the same game over and over again, reskinning it, adding maybe a little bit of a different story and using the same engine. And after selling you on maybe a $60, $70 game, they would add DLCs, skins that serve no purpose. Now, because of this failed model, they're trying to reignite the spark that they once have, which is with Assassin's Creed Shadows. And like I said, it reinvites what I said earlier. It's that games aren't just meant to be played anymore and live past their release dates. They're made to shake you dry of everything you have and just be sold. And no, not every game is like this. We still get developers like From Software giving us passionate titles like Elden Ring, which was a finished game on launch and didn't shaft us in the long run. And there's a few other titles from developers I don't really feel like mentioning. And then there's indie developers who also put in their pain, and there's the few stragglers that try to follow after the entire big studios, which is just flipping assets off of Unity into a half-finished, unbaked game and never gets updated again. But these people, these developers, these publishers, they are exceptions in the space. And not everyone is sort of following this trend of actual passion. I feel as if the industry didn't just shift overnight. with them wanting to optimize games for clicks, playtime, microtransactions, and I still got love for these games. I just really miss when the games actually loved us back and weren't parasitic in nature. Most people would say that they grew out of games. I don't believe that at all. I believe that games just stopped growing with us, causing the shift, as we are now in a future that is led by most games aren't being produced with the intention of living after launch, but rather extracting whatever they can out of the players' pockets, wherever possible.